The news is breaking right now across every major outlet. After weeks of silence and a trail that seemed to go nowhere, there has been a massive update in the disappearance and death of Nancy Guthrie. People all over the country have been holding their breath, waiting for a name, a face, or any kind of sign that justice might be coming. That sign finally arrived today. A man known as D4VD has been taken into custody. This is the moment everyone was hoping for, but it brings up just as many questions as it answers. Nancy Grace has been at the forefront of this story, her voice filled with the same urgency she brings to every major case. She stood before the cameras and laid it out clearly for the world to see. A male suspect is being held south of Tucson, Arizona. This isn't just a random traffic stop or a lucky break. This is the result of a long, hard look into what happened during that one night that changed everything for the Guthrie family. When Nancy first went missing, it felt like the world stopped. Now, it feels like the gears are finally turning again. The location where D4VD was found is very significant to the timeline of this case. It's a place south of Tucson, known for wide open spaces and desert heat. This isn't the first time the police have been out there looking for answers. A few weeks ago, there was a lot of noise about a SWAT team deployment in that exact region. People saw the tactical gear and the heavy vehicles and thought the end of the mystery was near. But that mission ended in total silence. It fizzled out. There were no arrests, no major breakthroughs, and a lot of frustrated family members. It felt like a dead end, but investigators didn't just give up. They went back to the drawing board and looked at the evidence they already had. Sheriff Nanos and the Pima County Sheriff's Department have been playing things very close to their chest throughout this entire process. They haven't been holding big press conferences or giving out many details to the public. This silence has been hard for people, but it's often a sign that they are trying to protect a delicate investigation. Investigative reporter Dave Mack has been digging through his sources to find out what really happened. He has noted that the tone from law enforcement has shifted from one of searching to one of securing. They aren't looking for a needle in a haystack anymore. They think they have found the person who put it there. Right now, it's important to understand exactly where we are in the legal process. D4VD is currently being detained for questioning. In the world of law and order, that is a very specific term. It's different from a formal arrest for a specific crime like murder. It means the police have enough cause to keep him while they ask hard questions. They are looking at his movements, his history, and his potential connection to Nancy. The formal charges usually come after the investigators get those last few pieces of confirmation they need from the lab. They don't want to rush it and risk a mistake that could let him walk free later on. The investigation has moved from the dusty roads south of Tucson to the sterile environment of a high-tech laboratory. The focus has shifted from physical searches in the desert to scientific breakthroughs that could change everything. For a long time, the crime scene at Nancy's house didn't seem to offer much. It was clean, maybe too clean for comfort. But a second look changed everything for the detectives. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. This shift to forensics is what really pushed the case over the edge. It wasn't just about a tip or a sighting in the woods. It was about something small, something nearly invisible that was left behind. While the local police were busy on the ground, the FBI was working behind the scenes. They were looking at the microscopic details of Nancy's bedroom. They found something that hadn't been caught during the first sweep of the house. It was a breakthrough that nobody expected to find this late in the game. It is the primary reason why D4VD is sitting in a room right now, facing investigators. The investigation is finally moving toward the truth, and the scientific evidence is leading the way. To truly understand how we reached this point in the investigation, we have to look at the work of experts like Tammy Ballard. She is a consultant who specializes in DNA and crime scenes, and she has been following this case very closely. According to the latest reports, a major shift happened when the FBI took over the forensic part of the investigation. Usually, a local sheriff's department would use their own contracted labs in the area, but in Nancy Guthrie's case, the evidence was sent directly to the FBI lab in Quantico, Virginia. This was a clear sign that the authorities knew they were dealing with something that required the highest level of technology. They bypassed all the standard local procedures because they knew this case was going to be decided by the smallest details. The most critical piece of evidence didn't come from the desert or a car. It came from inside Nancy's own home, specifically her bedroom. Forensic teams went back into that room weeks after the initial disappearance. They were looking for microscopic traces that might have been missed. That is when they found it. A single hair. Finding a hair in a bedroom might seem like nothing, but the location made it a bombshell. This hair didn't belong to Nancy, and it wasn't in a place where a guest would normally leave one. It was a silent witness to whatever happened that night. It was the break they had been praying for since the search began. Tammy Ballard explains that for many years, a hair without a root was almost useless to police. Most people know about nuclear DNA, which is found in the root. It contains the full genetic code of a person, drawing from both parents. If you have the root, you can identify the person perfectly. However, most hairs that are left behind at a crime scene are shed naturally, meaning they don't have that root attached. For a long time, this was a dead end for investigators. They could look at the color or the texture, but they couldn't prove who it belonged to with absolute certainty. This limitation often allowed suspects to walk away if no other biological evidence was present. This is why the involvement of the FBI was so important. At Quantico, they have access to advanced mitochondrial DNA testing. This type of DNA is only passed down through the maternal line. While it isn't as unique as the DNA from a root, it is much more durable. But the real game changer is a new method called SNP technology. This allows scientists to take a rootless hair and actually sequence the genome to create a profile. It is incredibly complex work that few labs in the world can do correctly. By using this technology, the FBI was able to build a genetic map of the person who left that hair in Nancy's bedroom. It turned a previously useless strand of hair into a powerful and undeniable tool. Once that map was created, the investigators didn't even need the suspect to be in a criminal database. They could use genetic genealogy. This is the same process used to solve many cold cases recently. They take the DNA profile and compare it to public databases where people upload their information to find family members. This allows the police to find the relatives of the suspect and work their way down the family tree until they find a match. It turns every distant cousin into a potential witness. This is likely the exact path that led them to identify D4VD as the primary suspect. The fact that this evidence was found weeks after the investigation began is being called a miracle. It shows the initial struggle was intense. When someone is in a hurry, they leave things behind. A single strand of hair held the key to the mystery. It provided the biological link that Sheriff Nanos needed most to secure a real conviction against this specific suspect. The news of the forensic breakthrough did not just stay inside the walls of the FBI lab. It leaked out into the real world in a very public and dramatic way. People who were watching the Today Show that morning saw something they rarely see on live television. Savannah Guthrie, one of the most professional anchors in the business, was in the middle of a segment with actress Anne Hathaway. Everything seemed normal until it was not. Savannah received an update, and without much explanation, she had to leave the set. She simply disappeared from the broadcast. This was not a scheduled transition or a commercial break. She was gone, and her co-anchors had to pick up the pieces and keep the show moving. The timing of her departure was too close to the updates in Nancy Guthrie's case to be a simple coincidence. When a high-profile news anchor leaves her post in the middle of a live segment, it usually means something massive has happened. In this case, it signaled that the family was finally getting the answers they had been waiting for. It suggested that the investigation had moved past the point of simple questions and had reached a definitive moment. While people speculated about what was happening behind the scenes, the reality was that the legal gears were turning faster than they ever had before. This moment highlights the human side of the story. While detectives look at maps and scientists look at DNA sequences, there are families waiting for a phone call. Savannah's sudden exit was a reminder that this is not just a cold case or a police report. It is a family tragedy that is playing out on a national stage. It indicated that the news coming from Pima County was significant enough to pull a major professional away from her responsibilities in an instant. The deduction from most experts is that while she might not have received news of a recovery, she likely received confirmation of the DNA match or the arrest of D4D. Meanwhile, back in the lab, the work on that single hair was reaching a critical point. DNA experts like Tammy Ballard point out that hair analysis is often a one-shot deal. Unlike a large blood stain or a pool of saliva, a single strand of hair provides a very limited amount of biological material. You cannot run the test 20 times. You have to get it right the first time because the process of extracting the DNA often destroys the original sample. This is why the FBI was so careful. They were not just looking for the hair itself. They were looking for any minute traces of skin cells or sweat that might have been clinging to it. During a physical struggle, skin cells are often shed. If D4VD had been in that room and had a physical interaction with Nancy, the evidence would be there. Even if the room looked clean to the naked eye, the microscopic world tells a different story. These biological markers are what turn a person from a suspect into a defendant. The FBI lab in Quantico has the tools to find these traces even when they are weeks old. This persistence of evidence is what often catches criminals who think they have cleaned up their mess. This specific hair is being called a miracle because it survived the initial sweep and the passage of time. Sheriff Nanos and the Pima County Sheriff's Department have also changed their stance. For several weeks, they were relatively silent, which led to a lot of frustration from the public. People wanted to know why the investigation seemed to be moving so slowly, but we now know that they were coordinating closely with federal authorities. The sheriff recently released a statement confirming this cooperation. He explained that the silence was necessary to protect the integrity of the forensic testing. They did not want to alert D4VD or give him any reason to flee before they had the scientific proof in hand. Now that the suspect is in custody, the community in Tucson is starting to feel a sense of relief, even if it is mixed with sadness. The investigation is not over, but the most dangerous part of the hunt is finished. D4VD is behind bars, and the legal team is preparing the case for a grand jury. The focus now is on ensuring that the DNA results from the federal lab are processed and documented so they can be used in court. As it stands, Nancy Guthrie's case has moved from a desperate search to a high-stakes legal battle. The evidence found in her bedroom has bridged the gap between a disappearance and a crime. The truth is no longer hidden. It is being written in the genetic code discovered in a single room. This arrest marks the beginning of the journey toward justice for Nancy Guthrie.